Hey YouTube, this is White One Auto checking in again. So what we have right here is, I believe, a 2004 GMC Denali. It was brought in for a no start. They're already very aware that they have some serious wiring issues. Like, this is how the truck was brought to me. Somebody put an engine in it, and for whatever reason had to destroy the wiring system. This is why I say bad mechanics do more damage to vehicles than vehicles actually breaking themselves. This is completely unnecessary and unsafe. So what we're gonna have to do is clean up this wiring, and hopefully the engine that they put in will be okay. And this stuff is just horrible. Like right here, there is a grommet that goes through the firewall. But what they decided to do was move that grommet out and pass a piece of speaker cable through there in between the grommet and the body, which virtually eliminates the need for a grommet, because the grommet is to protect the wiring from grounding out against the body. And this was to some amplifier for an aftermarket sound system, which the cable's pretty small, so you know it didn't have a lot of amps, but definitely enough amps to where if it grounded out, it could definitely set this thing on fire. I mean, this by far is, I think, one of the worst attempts of wiring I've seen in a newer car. I've seen a lot worse in older vehicles, but this is pretty bad for a newer car. So we're gonna clean this thing up, make some new battery cables, and I get this thing squared away. So I'll check back in with you in a couple moments. So this is what this thing looks underneath. This is a ground that they made. Really bad. When they put the engine in, they didn't sit the wiring harness support back up in the front cover as it should be. They just laid it up here. And the crazy thing about it is the bolt is still right here for where the wiring harness holder sits at the front cover. You can see all of this wiring. The initial problem probably was just that this hydro boost unit, the pump, the hydro boost unit, and the master cylinder are all leaking. So that's what probably deteriorated the wiring. And then they just made it worse by not routing the cables back correctly. So we're gonna get this thing all cleaned up. Hey, so we got our Yukon running here. We got our harness holder at the front cover re-secured. This thing does have a really bad power steering fluid leak. It's actually leaking from the lines, the pump, and the hydro boost. So we got that hooked all back up. Then we'll go up top. So we got our positive battery cable here routed back through that little block. We have our negative cable and our negative ground hooked up down there. We installed a new coolant temp sensor connector, as well as we replaced the coolant temp sensor with another one I just had laying around the shop. It was good. But the reason why we replaced that connector is because the old coolant temp sensor had melted off. Had melted, and the connector melted inside of it, so we couldn't install our new connector in there. So the thing's running fine. As of this point, we don't have a check engine light, which I am amazed. No check engine light. Our battery is charged in there. We got 14 volts. So we're good on our end. So we're gonna let this thing run for a little while and then cut it off and let it cool off. And then try to start it again, just to make sure it starts up fine during cold start and hot. Hey YouTube, so we checking back in. This here is our Yukon. So this thing has an aftermarket alarm, which I don't like the way it's wired in. So I talked to the customer, and we agreed to pull this thing out and restore it back to factory with the factory security system. I know a lot of you guys will look at this and say, man, that's how my alarm looks. But this is not good. Just wires all taped together. This is just not a very good installation. So we're gonna pull this out of here and put it back to the factory security system. So just so you can see, it starts before, let's, if I can turn the key. So that's with the alarm hooked up, and we'll give you a video after it's removed. Hey YouTube, so we back. So we removed this mess of alarm wiring out of the truck, and we have corrected our factory wiring to get that back to the way it was from the factory. This wire that you see here and this other black wire goes to some lights that the owner has installed in the truck and he wants to keep. So we'll just hit the key to make sure we're still working there. So you see we're all good there. All our gauges and everything are working. So we'll button this up. And this one, we also gonna put the power steering pump and hose on here as well. So we'll get that buttoned up and check back in. Hey YouTube, how is it going? So we have our new power steering pump on, and so we did a pump with the reservoir already attached, and we also did a new line here, the pressure line that goes to the hydro boost unit. So I'll make sure I get fluid coming up here, then we'll bleed the rest of the system and then start it up and get this thing complete. I'll check back in once everything is done so you can hear it running for the final time, and this job will be done. YouTube, so we checking back in with our final update for our 06 Denali project. Remember, this thing was towed in as a no start, no crank, and we found that the battery cables, both the negative and positive, were routed completely wrong, and all of the engine grounds, well, 2 of the engine grounds were bad. So we corrected our battery cables, reinstalled our red block, wired up the negative side as it should be. And remember, one of the big issues that was originally causing the wire to deteriorate along with its misrouting was a power steering fluid leak. So the owner agreed to go ahead and replace the power steering pump and reservoir, as well as a pressure and a return line. And this vehicle also had a poorly installed aftermarket alarm. So we eliminated that as well, and we are good now. So we have a good crank from the key. We have power steering. I think this vehicle still needs some brake lines. And other than that, she is ready to go. We are done here at White One Auto. So thank you for checking in today. And we'll see you next time. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe.